Moving on, the peak festive season spending made a slight comeback as sales over the December period beat the previous year's level to reach 93 billion rand. For more, we're joined by Solly Bellingan, who is the head of customer relations at BankServ. Solly, thanks so much for your time. Looking at the data that has come through, what's different between last year's December figures and the previous year in 2020 when we were in the initial stages, I suppose, of the COVID lockdowns?
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I think if we have to think about what was different, the obvious thing is that we've published some numbers that show that there's been an increase in spend across a various number of categories. There has been an increase in spend. We think that the kind of lifted lockdown is probably what contributed to that. But what really has been different, people have spent more on their cards at point of sale devices as well as online. And at the same time, we've seen a slight decrease in the use of cash by the banks and in order to distribute across their channels.
For the benefit of our viewers, how is this report put together and how do you get your data?
BankServ Africa is the national payment system operator. So we process payments between the various banks. So for lack of a better term, we are the switch between the banks and also therefore process a number of card transactions. So we use our data of all of the transactions that are processed through our systems, and we analyze those data because we have certain elements of data available in each transaction.
Okay, let's get into the actual details of the numbers. Where did you see the highest value of spending?
Look, the spend value was there's been a couple of categories, but I'd say the highest value has always been in grocery stores. So grocery, we would recognize a grocery transaction, and over December and generally cards are very much used in the grocery stores. But that's over December and over the festive period has always been the highest value. The interesting thing, though, to see in comparison to that, although smaller numbers, we do see quite a bit more spending happening than throughout the year in things like restaurants, eating places, clothing stores, and so forth as well, as people enjoy the holidays.
What's also interesting, and as you mentioned, I suppose it speaks to what you were talking about when it relates to the lockdown measures, is that the volumes were highest at eating places and restaurants. And I suppose it's also a different point of view given where we were 29th of December 2020.
Absolutely, and I think that was the difference this year. I think people felt more. Look, the lockdown levels were different, but I think people must have felt more comfortable about going out and interacting a little bit more, and the restaurants were given definitely a little bit more leeway. So I think people generally just felt a bit more free to get out this year, or as I say, this past December than they have been able to in 2020.
What was quite interesting, and perhaps you can expand on this one a little bit, is that the amount of cash circulating in South Africa was also in high numbers in December. What do you think contributed to that?
There's an interesting thing that a phenomenon that we saw during lockdown since the start of lockdown was there was almost a gravitation back to the use of cash. In a lot of industries, and we saw that throughout the lockdown period ourselves as well as the banks. We run a system where the banks can order cash from the cash processors to have cash available in their branches and their ATMs, and we get this data from our cash ordering system. And it was quite interesting to see that was like a general phenomenon almost. And last year we saw quite high value in cash being ordered by the banks to have readily available. So there's definitely still a demand in cash, and apparently even more so during lockdown. Just out of interest's sake, our top number in terms of any orders for any given day was on Black Friday in November last year. That's the most we've ever had to process cash orders. So cash is definitely still real, although we definitely are seeing some gravitation back towards the digital space, and that is why there was a slight decrease from last December to this time around. But those are still very huge numbers.
Solly, how often is this report put together, and how long does it take to get that data? Because you did mention you're sort of the middle person between customer and banks. How often do you read this type of data?
We read the data on a regular basis, so we publish a number of different elements and reports. So we would have indices throughout the year where we use our data to publish a couple of economic indices and salary indexes and a couple of things like that. Normally, it takes us about a week or two to take the data, analyze it, and see what we can read from the data before we actually publish reports. Because a report, you don't want to just publish numbers out there. You actually want to publish some intelligence together with those numbers. And the other thing that we also do is shortly after Black Friday, we would also publish some Black Friday results, like we have done with this particular report, which more focuses on the overall December and festive spend.
Right. What kind of trends can we read into, the data that's come through here, especially, let's take it from your experience working with BankServ and looking at this data coming through on a year-on-year basis. What should be the key takeaway here for us?
I would say the key takeaway, there's a little bit more data behind what we've published, and we've shared some numbers. There's a couple of key takeaways, apologies. I think the first one is online. We definitely are seeing an increase in the use of online transactions, and especially over Black Friday, that's visible, but even during the festive spend. So that's the interesting first thing that we've picked up. Online is definitely becoming more prevalent, and online transactions, and I think people are starting to feel more safe around what the industry's given them to protect their credit card details, etc., etc. The other thing was also that the going out and fast food outlets and restaurants and just getting out there has been quite big in the December spend. So although people have been on holiday and have been taking breaks, it would appear that if you look at it geographically as well, quite a lot of spend still in, for instance, in Gauteng. So something we are picking up is very possibly a lot of people would have as we would say, go to Romania and remain at home, but still try to get out and so on. That was the one thing. And the only other takeout really that like I've said earlier, is there's still definitely a big prevalence for the use of cash in the retail world.
Solly, thank you so much for your time. That is Solly Bellingan, who is the Head of Customer Relations at BankServ.